So are Canada-U.S. relations turning a corner? Well, in an interview with the National Post, the new U.S. ambassador to Canada commented on the threats to Canada's sovereignty from our southern neighbors.
From my standpoint, from the president's standpoint, 51st state's not coming back. The president may bring it up every once in a while, but he recognizes it's not going to happen unless the prime minister engages with the president.
It's not coming back, really? Well, Pete Hoekstra says it's done, but is it? Let's bring in the front bench. Sabrina Grover was a federal Liberal candidate in the 2021 election. She's senior advisor at Spark Advocacy and North Star Public Affairs. Anthony Kosh is a federal conservative strategist and managing principal at AK Strategies. He previously served as national campaign spokesperson and director of communications to conservative leader Pierre Poilievre. We also have former Ontario NDP MPP Gurjit Singh. He's now vice president at Crestview Strategy. He's also the brother of federal NDP leader Jagmeet Singh. And joining us in studio as well, CTV News national correspondent Rachel Aiello. Sabrina, I'm going to start with you on this one. So do we believe him, the U.S. ambassador? Or, who do we believe in all of this, the U.S. ambassador or the man who appointed him?
Well, I don't really think you can take Donald Trump at his word on any given day. Every day is a new adventure. So I would say we believe him temporarily for the immediate future. I will say that I think that the meeting that Mark Carney and President Trump had over this week was positive. And it looked a lot more positive than any of the other meetings I've seen Donald Trump have with leaders in the Oval Office. Certainly, if you look at that video that the White House produced after the meeting itself, it really gave Mark Carney a bit of a celebrity treatment and looked like President Trump respected Mark Carney, that he valued what he had to say and that he valued the approach that he's bringing from Canada. So I think that, as starting points, I believe that there is a good place for both of these countries to be negotiating. There's still a lot of room and time before we have to renegotiate CUSMA. The UK deal that the U.S. signed earlier this week also might give us some signals into how the United States is changing its approach, especially as the economic impacts of the tariffs and the stock crashes and some of the other actions that the United States has pursued actually take root and affect Americans. So I think, all in all, not every week is going to be like this, but not a bad week with Donald Trump.
Anthony, let's go back to the start of the week, Tuesday anyways, when what we heard from the Oval Office was Trump saying it takes two to tango and then also never say never. So even just in that, it was a bit of a mixed message. What are you taking away from the U.S. ambassador to Canada and what he's saying, which sounds a little more definitive?
I think the president is a troll. I don't think that's going to be a surprise to very many Canadians. Canadians have been clear. There's no real domestic interest. If there was ever, there certainly is none now on the Canadian side of things in wanting to join the United States of America. So is Trump the most unpredictable guy who likes to say random things on camera at every available opportunity? He's probably still going to bring this up a few times. Yes. And I expect that will very much be the case, as we just discussed, as CUSMA negotiations start to heat up. In order to put some gasoline on the flames, I have no doubt that he's going to say some inflammatory things. But at the end of the day, it was nice. Again, does speak to how much our expectations have lowered, but it was nice to hear the President of the United States refer to our Prime Minister by his proper title, even give him a few compliments, and drop the whole governor shtick and all that other sort of stuff. So at the end of the day, I don't think it's a surprise to anybody that Canada is not going to become the 51st state yesterday, today, or any point in the future. I think there were some positives to take away from the meeting, though some of them I just outlined. But at the end of the day, I do think it's important that we also recognize that not much has really changed. We're still sort of, and obviously, we just had an election. There's a lot of negotiations to happen from this point forward. But there's been some improvements, and I'm choosing to be optimistic, as I think Canadians should be.
Gurjit, if they're feeling optimistic, how are you feeling about this, especially with what Hoekstra said, I should say, and what that means for negotiations going forward, because those are going to start in earnest eventually.
So I'm optimistic about the Prime Minister's approach to Trump so far. I think about the memes making their rounds on TikTok of him saying never, 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 like mouthing it 30 times, it seemed like, when in response to the 51st state comment by President Trump. But that being said, I think this might even be a tactic by President Trump, like the whole yo-yo thing. He wants to put you on the offensive, then he wants to disarm you a little bit, then bring it back a bit. So I don't think we can trust anything that the president says, and I think he wants to destabilize. Remember, for President Trump, chaos is a virtue. For him, he thinks being chaotic, being unpredictable, being someone who keeps you at the edge of your seat is a way that you actually get advantage in negotiations. And I think the stability we saw in response, in quite contrast by the Prime Minister, is a good thing, especially given all this uncertainty. So I will definitely be holding my breath in this context. I think we should all be collectively and just really, make sure that we're putting in place as much protections as possible, given things without, giving to the pun go south again.
Yeah, and it's interesting, Rachel, because to Gerdeton's point, we've seen this movie before.
Yeah.
We didn't know what the sequel would look like, but it's starting to have the same plot lines almost. I mean, Kelly Craft was the ambassador here to Canada in Trump 1, and she was more of a measured tone as well. Do you expect this, as Gerdeton was sort of painting as a picture of one maybe playing the good guy, the other one playing the bad guy in this?
Yeah, and we've seen that already play out within the Trump administration in D.C. between what Howard Lutnick was saying sometimes and what Trump would say. That is kind of that bounce back and forth. But yeah, you and I both covered the NAFTA renegotiations, and that was a consistently, targets would move, or it'd be a good signal and then be a bad signal, and it would be this and that. And so while I think this meeting for Mark Carney was crucial, and certainly I think went as well as one could hope, it's going to be tested over and over and over again. It's not necessarily always going to be an Oval Office sit-down. It could be, one of those side door chats at the U.S. Trade Office between him and whoever he picks as the finance or the international trade minister. And so there's going to be lots of key moments ahead. What I'm watching to see is whether the unity we're starting to see from the Conservative Party, for example, and wanting to say that they want Canada to get a good deal, and what kind of role the NDP will play, how that coalesces, and if that solidarity or that Canada unity that we're seeing in the short term after the election holds strong as these negotiations get tougher.
And how important is that, Sabrina, that the solidarity holds strong, but also that as a government, this Liberal government sort of stays there and says, okay, this was a good week, but we don't know what next week will bring, and maybe calibrate themselves in that way?
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately it's important for Mark Carney entering this new government to really maintain the relationships and the conversations and the openness with all of the premiers. I think that maintaining that conversation is going to be crucial to solidarity. I mean, we've obviously seen some cracks in that, but I think that the ability for the Prime Minister to say that he has the premiers on his side and to be negotiating across the country, individually as they have, but with the same unified message and the same objectives and goals is really, really important. And then beyond that, I think the next real test for the Canada-U.S. relationship, assuming nothing crazy happens in the next 5 weeks, which I can't say for definitively, is the G7. So what does that G7 look like, and how does President Trump interact when he's actually in Canada with Mark Carney and all of the other leaders as well? So I think that that'll be probably one of the biggest tasks that Prime Minister Carney and his cabinet are going to have to, Photoshop even in coming into what it looks like in the next couple of weeks here.
Anthony, how important is this G7 compared to how the last G7 went and ended, frankly?
Yeah, well, I definitely think Canadians are hoping for some contrast. But again, this is sort of the beginning. There's a lot of moving parts right now. We've got the same government with a new head, but a new president who's also a former president. So it's kind of funny in that regard. But obviously, this is going to be the big docket on the item. I'm curious to see who the Americans actually send as a part of their delegation. But at the end of the day, I mean, it sounds like we're talking about the same thing every week. Donald Trump tariff threats, Donald Trump tariff threats, Donald Trump tariff threats. But it's, again, the #1 topic on most people's minds, as it should be. And I'd like to say that I had more insights into this than I do. But I guess when it comes to the president, you just sort of have to wait and see and hope for the best while expecting the worst.
Gerdeton, what do you think that Canada should do in terms of the G7? Not to say that we roll out the red carpet, but really they have to sort of calibrate themselves differently this time, right?
I think what we saw from the Prime Minister during his interaction with the President is a bit of like a microcosm for how he should engage within the greater context of the G7, which is being firm on the issues that matter most. So our sovereignty, making sure we're getting a good deal for Canadians. At the same time, though, having that openness, given the relationship that we need with the Americans and with President Trump. I think the way that the Prime Minister balanced that was a smart thing. And I know for Canadians it might be difficult to see that all the time, but ultimately he needs to get a good deal for Canadians, and having the firm stance on what's most important, which is our sovereignty and our tariffs, and then having that openness and welcomingness on the other side could be advantageous to disarming Trump. Because if we're just head to head, it could result in more friction, and ultimately we need to make sure we're building paths despite the chaos and the inappropriateness coming from Mr. Trump.
Yeah, and Rachel, in closing, it seems like they're off to a better start, because when he talked about that 51st state thing and saying Canada's not for sale, a lot of places aren't for sale, like this place, talking about the Oval Office in the White House or Buckingham Palace. And he made Trump laugh. It almost felt like that was a moment, right?
Yeah, I would love to know who came up with that line. But I think going back to the G7, it'll be interesting to see how the other world leaders handle Trump in that dynamic. We've seen one-offs between Trump and other world leaders, and some of them, Trump has talked disparagingly about Canada during them, and those other world leaders haven't had our back. Do they pull that again in Canada, or is this an opportunity for Mark Carney to shore up support and kind of show Donald Trump, hey, us and all of these other very economically powerful allies are aligned on this, and we're not going to tolerate it?
Yeah. Okay. We're going to have to see when that eventually happens in Kananaskis, Alberta.